My name is Stella, and I want to share the roller coaster journey my life has taken. It all started in an environment of affluence, being the cherished only child of my wealthy parents. My father, Meadow, was a successful businessman, while my mother, Haley, was a renowned socialite known for hosting the city's most splendid gatherings. They ensured I lacked for nothing, enveloping me in love and care. As I ventured into college, my sole focus was to make my parents proud. I dedicated myself entirely to my studies. That's when Jason came into my life. His persistence was undeniable. He would wait for me after classes, bring me coffee during my late-night study sessions, and unexpectedly turn up at our house. One day, in our living room, he boldly told my parents, "Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, I am deeply in love with your daughter and want you to know I have serious intentions." My father saw Jason as the son he never had and was quickly impressed, even suggesting I consider dating him because he seemed like a promising match. Reluctantly, I agreed. To my surprise, Jason's charm and attentiveness won me over. Our relationship flourished, and soon after graduation, we married. My parents, especially my father, were thrilled, seeing Jason as the son he'd always desired. At our wedding reception, my father enthusiastically welcomed Jason into our family and promptly helped him start his own business, a modern car wash facility, and also assisted us in buying our first cozy home. A year into our marriage, we welcomed our son, Wyatt. Holding him for the first time ignited in me an unparalleled depth of love. I embraced motherhood wholeheartedly, dedicating myself to full-time parenting duties that revolved around Wyatt's needs. Life settled into a predictable rhythm as Wyatt grew from a bubbly toddler to a spirited child and eventually into a contemplative teenager. Meanwhile, Jason struggled with the car wash business, feeling diminished under my father's shadow. He frequently lashed out, feeling belittled by what he perceived as his handouts. Despite my efforts to comfort him, our home life became tense, filled with arguments that left me treading lightly to avoid conflict. Wyatt, sensing the strain, retreated into himself, spending more time alone or with friends. As years passed, the physical toll of stress and motherhood reshaped me. I was no longer the trim college student Jason had pursued. He pointed out my changed appearance disparagingly, suggesting I had let myself go. Despite the hurt these words caused, I told myself he was simply stressed and didn't mean them. Yet as I navigated these challenges, I realized the importance of finding strength within and cherishing my worth, regardless of the storms life brought. As I navigated the tempestuous waters of my life, it became painfully clear that the foundations of my marriage to Jason were crumbling. Then one sunny Tuesday that seemed like any other, I received a devastating phone call. A somber voice informed me, "Mrs. Thompson, I regret to inform you that your parents have been involved in a small plane crash in Florida. I'm sorry, but they didn't survive." The following weeks were a blur of funeral arrangements and settling estates, a process made even more challenging by Jason's startling absence. When Jason was present, his demeanor was unsettlingly upbeat. Just a week after the funeral, he began pressing me about the inheritance. "Have you talked to the lawyer yet? We need to sort this out," he urged, his tone shockingly indifferent to my grief. I was taken aback by his insensitivity. "Jason, can't this wait? I'm still grieving," I said, to which he replied bluntly, "Business doesn't wait, Stella. We need to know where we stand financially." With a heavy heart, I scheduled a meeting with Mr. Hudson, our family lawyer. In Mr. Hudson's elegantly appointed office, the atmosphere was tense. He began, "Mrs. Thompson, your parents' will is quite unique. It's split into two parts, and I can only disclose the first part now. The second will be revealed in exactly 1 year." Jason leaned in eagerly as Mr. Hudson continued, "The mansion is left to your future grandchildren, with their guardians acting as trustees until they come of age." I was dumbfounded. Wyatt, our only son, wasn't even married. Wyatt, who had insisted on attending, reacted with a surprising, "Well, that opens up some interesting possibilities." His casual remark puzzled me, but before I could question him, Jason interjected angrily, "That's it. What about the rest? The businesses? The money?" Mr. Hudson firmly replied, "The rest will be revealed next year." As we left the office, the dynamics between us had palpably shifted. Jason was unusually silent, and Wyatt appeared contemplative. Not long after the will's initial reading, Wyatt made a startling announcement at dinner. "Mom, Dad, there's someone I want you to meet." The following day, he introduced us to Ma, a pretty young woman with a guarded smile. "This is my wife, and she's pregnant with our child," he declared. I was stunned. Wife? Pregnant? How had this all happened so quickly? Wyatt explained they had married hastily upon learning of the pregnancy. I glanced at Jason, who seemed oddly pleased, nodding in approval. Something felt unsettling about the situation, but I shelved my doubts, focusing instead on the fact that I was about to become a grandmother. "Congratulations," I managed to say, mustering enthusiasm. "This is quite a surprise." Ma's smile widened. "Thank you, Mrs. Thompson. I'm so excited to be part of your family." May moved in soon after, citing the need for family support during her pregnancy. Initially, I was thrilled to have another woman in the house, but as time passed, the household dynamics shifted dramatically. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this sudden marriage than met the eye. Yet amidst the chaos and secrets, I found a new role awaiting me, one that promised a different kind of love and connection. It soon became clear that Ma had her plans, which involved undermining me subtly. Whenever I cooked, she'd grimace and make comments suggesting I was doing it wrong. Her interactions with Jason were even more alarming. She would laugh at his jokes, touch his arm, and shower him with compliments, praising his business acumen. Jason predictably enjoyed the attention and started spending more time at home, but not with me. He would discuss business with me for hours while I felt pushed aside. I tried discussing Ma's behavior with Wyatt, but he dismissed my concerns, suggesting I was just jealous because I wasn't the center of attention anymore. His words stung deeply, and it pained me to think that my son was so dismissive of my feelings. Jason, on the other hand, seemed to thrive in this new family dynamic, clearly enjoying praise and looking at me with something that felt like contempt. One day, while grocery shopping, I bumped into Ruby, an old college friend. We caught up over coffee, and during our conversation, she brought up a memory that chilled me. She reminisced about a guy from our college days who pursued wealthy girls, a guy named Jason. My heart raced as she described him as the kind of person who ended up marrying a naive rich girl. The more she described, the more I realized she was talking about my Jason. My stomach turned as I drove home, realizing that our marriage might have been a sham. At home, I found Jason in his study. I confronted him about what I had learned. At first, he tried to dismiss it, but his brief look of fear gave him away. When I pressed him, he admitted, laughing, that he had indeed married me for my family's wealth and that he never loved me. His words were a devastating blow. He called me a burden, confessing with remorse that he stayed with me only for financial gain. This revelation left me reeling, facing the grim reality of our relationship and the need to confront what my life had become. It suddenly all made sense when Jason, with chilling clarity, revealed his true intentions. He no longer needed me because my parents had passed away, and their wealth would soon be within his reach. ostensibly for our grandson, but really for his control. The pieces fell into place. Wyatt's rushed wedding, Ma's timely pregnancy, and their demeaning treatment towards me. It was all a calculated scheme to inherit my family's wealth. "You planned all this?" I managed to ask, disbelief choking my voice. Jason's laugh was harsh, echoing off the walls. "Give credit where it's due. It was mostly Wyatt's idea. The boy has a good head for business," he boasted, a stark contrast to the way he dismissed my acumen. I felt like I was suffocating under the heavy realization of their betrayal. "Does Maeve know?" I asked, already dreading the answer. "Of course she does," Jason smirked. "She's a smart girl and knows a good opportunity when she sees one. She'll make a proper wife for a businessman." I couldn't bear it any longer and fled the room. My world shattered. Reality hit me hard. I had nowhere to go and no money of my own, not even enough to run a small apartment. With a heavy heart, I resigned myself to staying in a house filled with people I no longer trusted. 3 months later, Jason unceremoniously announced another shock. "Pack your bags, Stella," he declared as he entered the kitchen. "We're moving into your parents' house." The news nearly made me drop the knife I was holding. "When did we decide this?" I asked, though his mocking laugh told me I had no part in this decision. "We didn't. I decided. We're moving in with Wyatt and Maeve. After all, our grandson is the heir to that house." Each word felt like a slap in my face. "What about our house?" I asked. "Oh, that," Jason dismissed. "I sold it. The money's already spent on things for people I care about, and you're not on that list." Over the next few days, I watched in silent agony as Jason, Wyatt, and Maeve excitedly prepared for the move. They indulged in new cars, expensive clothes, and gadgets while I was ignored, bedridden, and forgotten. Moving to my parents' house felt like a cruel joke. Maeve claimed the master bedroom immediately, relegating me to a small guest room at the back of the house. As days turned into weeks, my isolation deepened. Maeve had her baby and turned the house into her kingdom with me as her reluctant servant. "Stella, the baby needs changing," she would call out. "Could you tidy up the living room? It's a bit messy." Despite the pain, I found a small comfort in caring for my grandson, his innocent smile a bittersweet solace. But one evening about a month after the move, I reached my breaking point. At dinner, which I had prepared, Maeve was particularly demanding. "Stella, fetch me some more water and hurry up with clearing these plates," she ordered. Something inside me snapped. All the years of pent-up frustration and hurt came pouring out. "Enough!" I shouted, slamming my hands on the table. "I am not your maid, Maeve. This is my parents' house, and I deserve some respect." The room fell into stunned silence as Maeve's face crumpled, unable to respond to the sudden assertion of my dignity. And so Maeve erupted into melodramatic tears, accusing me of harshness after everything they had supposedly done for me. Jason, his face flushed with anger, declared he'd had enough of my supposed ingratitude. "Pack your things and leave. This house belongs to our grandson now, and you're no longer welcome here," he announced. I was in shock, scarcely believing his words. "You can't be serious. Where am I supposed to go?" I'd asked, my voice tinged with desperation. Jason nonchalantly pulled out a stack of papers from his pocket. "I've been waiting for the right moment to give you these," he said, handing me divorce papers that were already signed. "I want you gone by morning," Jason declared. I turned to Wyatt, desperate for some sign of support, but he merely shrugged, avoiding my gaze. "I'm an adult now, Mom. I don't need you anymore." With trembling hands, I accepted the papers. As I walked out of the dining room, Ma's smirk was the last thing I saw. My world was in pieces, and I felt utterly alone. With no place to go and my heart heavy, I dialed a familiar number. "Ruby," I said, my voice shaky. "I need a place to stay." She answered promptly, and hearing the concern in her voice, she immediately offered her guest room. While settling in, Ruby shared her burdens. Her son was struggling after his fiancée, who was pregnant, had left him. Curious, I asked if she had a picture of her. As she showed me the photo, my heart froze. Staring back at me was Maeve, the very woman causing my despair. "Ruby," I began slowly, "I think I know where your son's fiancée is." Over cups of tea, I shared my entire ordeal. Ruby's face shifted from shock to anger, and then to determination. "We need to expose them," she asserted. Together we devised a plan. The next day, I returned to my parents' house under the pretext of collecting my belongings. While there, I managed to obtain a few strands of my grandson's hair for a DNA test. The wait for the results was excruciating, but they confirmed our suspicions. Ruby's son was the father of Ma's baby, not Wyatt. As I was pondering how to reveal this to Wyatt and Jason, I received a call from Mr. Hudson, my parents' lawyer. He asked me to review the second part of my parents' will in his office the next day. I listened, heart pounding, as he unveiled the contents. "To our beloved daughter Stella," he read, "we leave our luxury apartment, valued at $610,000. But there was more. In the event of a divorce, all their property, including the business Jason is involved in, will revert to you." It turned out my father had been the silent financier of Jason's business, and he had cleverly registered everything in his name. As Mr. Hudson explained, I was overwhelmed with emotion. All this time, I had thought I had nothing, but in reality, I had everything. When I inquired about the house Jason had sold, Mr. Hudson reassured me, "That's the only thing Jason can claim. Everything else is yours." As the reality of my newfound situation sank in, I couldn't help but laugh. Jason had thought he was being clever, but in the end, his plans had unraveled spectacularly. Jason had only outsmarted himself. When I first stepped into my new apartment, I was taken aback by its beauty. The place was a panorama of sleek lines, floor-to-ceiling windows, and elegant furnishings that radiated modern sophistication. For the first time in a long while, I felt truly at peace in what felt like a sanctuary. As I was admiring my new home, my phone rang. It was Wyatt. "Mom," he began urgently, "it's been a year since we read the first part of the will. We need to know what's in the second part." His tone was demanding, entitled even. "I'm sure Grandma and Grandpa left everything to me, right?" His assumption made me inwardly smirk. "Wyatt, this isn't a conversation for the phone. Why don't you, Ma, and your father come over tomorrow? I'll text you the address," I said calmly before hanging up. Immediately after, I called Ruby. "It's time," I told her. "Can you come over tomorrow morning? We're going to settle this once and for all." The next day, I heard the doorbell ring and took a deep breath before opening the door. Jason, Wyatt, Maeve, and the baby stood there, mouths agape as they took in the opulence of my apartment. Wyatt whistled in admiration. "Wow, Mom, this place is amazing. I can't wait to move in." Maeve's eyes sparkled with avarice as she remarked, "Yes, it'll be so nice once we change all this old lady decor, and of course, once we get rid of you, Stella." I raised an eyebrow at her audacity. "I wouldn't be so hasty if I were you," I replied, inviting them to sit on the plush sofa. I excused myself briefly, and when I returned, Ruby was with me. Her presence caused Ma to visibly falter. Before we discussed the will, I began, my voice steady. "There's someone I'd like you all to meet. This is my friend Ruby." Maeve's eyes darted around, seeking an escape, while Wyatt and Jason merely looked confused. Now, I continued, I think it's time we had a frank discussion. There are some truths that need to be revealed. I savored the moment, having rehearsed my words all night. The revelations I was about to unveil would change everything. As I faced those who had betrayed me, my ex-husband, my son, and the woman who had almost usurped my place, I felt a surge of righteous indignation. Ruby stepped closer, and Jason recognized her. His face twisted into a bitter smirk. Well, he sneered. Looks like I achieved my goal after all. Married a rich fool, didn't I? His words stung, but I remained composed. We'll address your betrayal later, Jason. Right now, there's something more pressing. I turned to Maeve, who squirmed under the scrutiny. We know the truth about you, Maeve. Wyatt, I said, turning to my son, whose face was a mask of confusion. When Ma heard about the will from you, she saw an opportunity. She decided to pass off someone else's child as your own to secure your grandparents' estate. Ruby's voice was steady as she delivered the final blow. The baby isn't Wyatt's. It's my son's child. The room fell deathly silent. I then presented the DNA test results. As the truth sank in, Ma's face lost all color. In a sudden flurry, she grabbed her bag. I don't need this. I don't need a beggar's child, she declared, storming out of the apartment. Wyatt stood there, shell-shocked, the baby still in his arms, looking utterly lost. Jason, recovering from his initial shock, asked in a small voice, "So, who gets this apartment?" I smiled, ready to enlighten him. Well, Jason, let me tell you about the second part of my parents' will, I explained, detailing the specifics of the inheritance, the apartment, the car, all of it. Jason's face fell further with each revelation. Suddenly, he was on his knees. Stella, please, I'm sorry. Forgive me, he pleaded, but his words barely registered as I considered all that had transpired. The weight of their deceit still lingered, but now tempered by the justice of their unraveling plans. I could feel the tension in the air as I looked at him. My voice was cold and unwavering. Get out, Jason. You have 2 days to leave my parents' house, or I'll call the police. Jason scrambled to his feet, desperation flashing across his face. He turned to Wyatt and said, "Give me the car I bought you. I need something." Wyatt's response was quick and firm. "No, it's mine. You're not getting anything from me." With one last look of frustration, Jason slunk out of the apartment, his shoulders slumped in defeat. I turned to Wyatt, who stood there, his head lowered in shame. Ruby, standing beside us, gently took the baby from his arms. I spoke to Wyatt with a tone that was firm yet not unkind. Since it turns out I don't have any grandchildren, and there are no other heirs to your grandparents' house besides me, I need you to move out as well. Wyatt didn't meet my eyes as he nodded. I'm sorry, Mom, for everything. I'll go pack my things. Without another word, he, too, left the apartment. As the door closed behind him, a heavy silence filled the room. The only sound now was the soft cooing of the baby in Ruby's arms. I looked at my old friend, feeling a mix of emotions, relief, sadness, and a strange sense of freedom. Well, I said, managing a small smile that didn't go exactly as I expected when I woke up this morning. Ruby nodded gently, bouncing the baby in her arms. You did what you had to do, Stella. They left you no choice. I sank onto the plush sofa, my mind racing as I realized something important. For the first time in years, I was truly free. Free from lies, free from manipulation, and free to live my life on my terms. The months that followed that fateful confrontation were a whirlwind of change and self-discovery. I found myself settling into my luxurious apartment. a place that became my sanctuary, a peaceful retreat where I could finally start anew. One of my first decisions was to rent out my parents' house. It felt right to have a young family move in, people who would appreciate the warmth and history of the house. The rental income provided a comfortable cushion, along with the money I earned from selling Jason's car wash business. My friendship with Ruby deepened as well. We spent time together over coffee, sharing stories and offering support through the ups and downs of our new lives. And then there was little Jason, Ruby's grandson, the child I had once believed to be my own. Despite the painful circumstances surrounding his birth, I found myself growing deeply attached to him. "He has your eyes," Ruby would joke during our visits, and we'd laugh, finding humor in the bizarre and tangled paths our lives had taken. As for Wyatt, our relationship was a slow and cautious rebuilding. The betrayal had hurt me deeply, but he was still my son, and I couldn't completely sever that bond. Our interactions were awkward at first, tentative phone calls and uncomfortable meetings in neutral coffee shops. But little by little, painfully, we began to heal and rebuild the relationship we had lost. Jason, on the other hand, became a shadow of my past. I heard through the grapevine that his once grandiose dreams of wealth and status had crumbled, all because of his exposed lies. I saw him only once, by chance, as I drove through town. He was working at a small kiosk, looking older and more worn than I remembered. For a brief moment, our eyes met, and I felt the flicker of something. No love, no longing, just a sense of closure. The light changed, and I drove on, leaving that chapter of my life firmly in the rearview mirror. And so, life moved on. With each passing day, I felt more at peace, finally free from the chaos of the past, embracing the new life I had worked so hard to create.